these work. Okay, I think we are almost there. I think we are live. Oh my gosh, I'm always just so excited and proud. We are live on the Facebook. Woo!
Hot dog.
Awesome. All right, to all of our friends, I want to introduce you to Sarah Weitz, like the color white.
That's right.
Just for the record, because I knew you when you were McCaskey. So that's how long I've known you. I've known you pre-marriage, pre-Galen. So Sarah has been just amazing to share her time. And when you hear what she does, you know how little that she has to talk to all of you about nutrition. You've had so many questions, and she's just this wealth of knowledge. She's been working with Boot Camp Challenge. Sir, I was trying to figure out, has it been like 12 years or?
I think so. Yeah, it's been 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. And she's just an amazing partner for Boot Camp Challenge. Anytime you guys have questions, you text me or any Boot Camp Challenge trainer, I text Sarah, she immediately responds back. And she's just a wealth of knowledge and super smart. So I invited her on here. So Sarah, I want to say thank you for taking time to talk to our community tonight.
You are so welcome. Very excited to see you as per usual.
I know. And then that's the thing. Then once we get together, we talk for hours. Don't worry, we won't keep you on here for hours. In fact, we put a time limit on, like, hey, we should probably limit this to an hour because we could talk for hours and hours.
Come on, Eastern time. Come on, we get it.
I know. She's like, I got a bed. I got babies. I got to teach university. But I do want to share with all of you that are joining us, if this is your first time meeting Sarah, she is a registered dietitian and also a certified culinary medicine specialist, which Sarah, I would love for you to share with us in just a moment what that is, because that is intriguing. She's also the administrative director at the Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. Super smart. And she teaches medical nutrition therapy, histology, and pathology. Wow, Sarah, you've been busy these last 2 decades.
I am staying out of trouble.
Yeah, yes, you are. And gifting all of us with your knowledge. So before we jump into all the questions, which those of you that are tuning in, thank you for your questions. They were amazing. And Sarah and I are going to try to get to most of them. But before we jump in, since the last time we've talked, Sarah, which has been a couple of years, you went on and got certified in culinary medicine specialist. And this intrigues me. Can you share with us what that is?
Sure. So in a nutshell, culinary medicine is teaching medical practitioners, so not just doctors, not just RDs, nurses, techs, anyone who has a medical degree and is interested in doing it. It teaches those medical practitioners how to teach patients to use food as medicine. So what it does is kind of demystifies, what you hear about eating healthy to reduce your risk of disease or to reduce your risk of all-cause mortality, and to make yourself as healthy as possible and live as healthy as possible of a life, but to make it achievable and sustainable and something that doesn't sound like it's going to be impossible or too difficult to do. And it advocates for small changes to adhere to a healthier lifestyle pattern, not a specific diet, and how you really can use nutrition to your best advantage on an everyday basis and meet your patients where they are to help changes to increase their overall health. And this is the program I trained with was at the Goldring Center for Culinary Medicine at Tulane University. And culinary medicine is just an interesting sort of facet of lifestyle medicine, which is another, kind of component of medicine that looks at lifestyle behaviors and how we can use diet, exercise, mindfulness, wellness to increase our health overall. So not just medicine, not just surgical intervention, but how you can use your lifestyle behaviors to make yourself as healthy as possible.
I got to tell you, I'm so excited about this and that you went through the program and you'll check off on the legitimacy, because I think that's what we need in our industry, in our fitness and wellness industry, is to train our trainers and our registered dietitians on how to help our community make little steps. Because I think a lot of times, at least I know with our community, all of our campers, they think, oh my gosh, I could never, quote, eat healthy. Well, to eat healthy is a very big thing, as opposed to, let's just start with 1 cup of water for breakfast, and small. So I love that there is an education and a certification for that. That's awesome. Is that new?
It's, I couldn't tell you exactly how old. It's relatively new.
Okay.
the program that I went through has been around for a little while now, but it's not something that's as widespread as, surgery or even other different types of medicine. So it's relatively new. I think it's a positive development in terms of, trying to get public health to where it needs to be with having patients take an active role in, managing their own health and wellness through healthy lifestyle behaviors.
Yes, love it, love it. Woo! Yay! All right, so Sarah, can we dive into the questions?
We sure can.
All right, 1 second. I'm gonna turn my light up just a titch. So pardon me, everybody on Facebook, as you see my. There we go. So there we go. A little more light. It's like, ooh, it's very dark in my office. Okay, so first question that I received: are eggs bad for you?
Okay, this question comes up a lot. It's come up.
Does it really?
Yeah. And it's come up for several decades at this point. And I think there's a comedian, Lewis Black, that talked about it once. He's like, are eggs good? Eggs are good. Eggs are bad. Just tell me what I need. It's breakfast. I have to eat, right? So the data seems to change relatively frequently. So what I want to go back to first is, why did we think eggs were bad to begin with? And that all to cholesterol. So we know that the egg yolks have a lot of cholesterol, and we know that cholesterol can build up on the linings of your blood vessels and lead to strokes and heart attacks, what we refer to as cerebrovascular accidents. Right. So the best at the time available evidence suggested that eating more eggs puts you at a greater risk of high cholesterol and therefore a greater risk of heart attack and stroke. So in recent years, newer, stronger evidence suggests that your fasting plasma cholesterol, so when your doctor asks you to not eat for 12 hours and then go get a blood test, they're testing fasting levels of glucose and cholesterol. So the newer evidence suggests that your fasting plasma glucose isn't affected by your dietary cholesterol intake, more so than your genetic makeup. So this evidence was actually strong enough that the dietary cholesterol has been removed as a nutrient of concern from most professional organizations' nutritional recommendations. So essentially what they're saying is that, what we thought before was that the cholesterol you eat has a really high impact on your blood cholesterol and your risk of heart disease. But it turns out your genes are probably stronger at that than your dietary cholesterol. So a lot of those organizations no longer even list dietary cholesterol as a nutrient of concern or something that needs to be limited.
So to answer the question, we can totally eat eggs. Those are great for you because cholesterol is no longer a concern for our overall cardiovascular health.
Right. I also don't want to make it sound, so if I were to eat a bunch of eggs or eat a bunch of food that has cholesterol in it, and then you take my blood, my cholesterol is going to be high because that's how digestion works. Same for fat, same for glucose. But, hi Zoe, sorry, my daughter just showed up.
Hey Zoe!
Yay. So if you eat a bunch of cholesterol, your cholesterol is going to go up, and you may see some, trends that change in time over your fasting plasma cholesterol. But what the newer and stronger evidence, like I said, is suggesting is that my risk of heart disease and my risk of high cholesterol has more to do with my family history and my personal genetic risk than it does the number of eggs that I eat. I should also preface it with what I say a lot of the times is that, we, particularly as Americans, tend to think that if a little of something is good, then a lot is better, or that if a little of something is bad, then none is better. And that's not where we want to exist with nutrition, because we don't eat just nutrients. We don't eat just, individual macros. We eat food, and we need to be able to eat food in a sustainable way. So what I'm saying is, if you want to have eggs for breakfast, you're probably fine.
Yay. I love eggs. You know what? Can a quick question off of that about the cholesterol? Is it indeed true that movement has a direct correlation to increase of your HDLs?
Yeah.
Is that true?
So
yeah.
Exercise can increase. True. Yep. Exercise can increase your HDL, so your high density lipoprotein, which is the good cholesterol.
Right.
It can also lower the LDL, or the low density lipoprotein, the bad cholesterol, but really the stronger effect we see of physical activity is on increasing your HDL, and that's the one you want to be higher.
Right. Okay. And that's what I thought, or that's what I had learned years ago. Just want to make sure that the science was still there. And so there is a direct correlation between movement increasing your HDLs, which that's what we want. We want the higher HDLs. And you're saying that the LDLs, they are finding that the science is now suggesting that that's more related to your genetics than anything.
Well, your total cholesterol level. Yep. Okay. Now your LDL you can lower with food too. You can use food as medicine. So this is where you're going to have foods that are higher in dietary fiber, insoluble and soluble. And so this is where the eating oatmeal for cholesterol there really is some good evidence behind that, is that if you're consuming these high fiber foods, such as oatmeal or such as other high fiber, whole grain products, then that has a measurable impact on your LDL, helping to lower it.
Okay, hence why the dietary community suggests whole grains for us to include those in our diet, right?
Among many other benefits of whole grains, yes, that's one of the things that it can help to lower your cholesterol.
Right, awesome. Okay, next question, is celery juice good for you?
So I had to look this one up because celery juice is one that I actually haven't heard a ton about. Now, juicing, yeah, people want to juice all the time.
Right.
They throw all of their vegetables in a blender or a juicer and have that juice. Whether or not I'm a fan of juicing is another point, but specifically celery juice. So there's not really scientific evidence to support a lot of the claims that are made about celery juice. And I say that because there really haven't been large-scale human studies on the topic. And very little research exists on celery that has been either cellular or bench research on just tissues or cell lines, or even animal research on that. So we barely have bench research or animal research. We certainly don't have a ton of human studies on it. So there's really just not strong evidence one way or the other. Now, there could be other factors that are influencing people who want to drink celery juice. It could influence their sense of well-being from having celery juice. You do definitely get better hydration because celery has a lot of water in it, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of water.
Right.
But it could also just be a placebo effect, which isn't inherently a bad thing. I hear a lot about, it's just a placebo effect. If something is making you feel better, does it matter if it really is happening on a, cellular level? I don't know. I would say no, especially if it's drinking celery juice. It's not going to hurt you. Celery juice does have more like potassium and vitamin K than other types of commonly consumed juices like tomato juice or carrot juice, but it is also lower in other important nutrients like vitamin A, like you would see in carrot juice. That bright, rich orange color comes from the vitamin A. And any vegetables, when they're juiced, they lose a lot of the phytonutrients and antioxidants when the pulp or the skin is taken out, especially if it is juiced and then strained before you consume it. So you do lose some of the beneficial effects of the fiber and some of the phytonutrients. It's not super clear how much of that loss occurs, but the nutrition community generally tends to recommend consuming your fruits and vegetables whole with all of their skin and pulp and fiber to make sure that you're getting all the beneficial effects of those nutrients as well, as opposed to just juicing it and drinking, the water and what else runs off.
Right. So what I hear you saying is eat a stalk of celery to get the full benefits of celery.
Yes, but what I'm also saying is that if you're not eating a lot of vegetables and you are inspired to drink a glass of celery juice,
then do that. Right. Oh, I love it. Okay. Next question. Do mushrooms really help with Alzheimer's?
There is some evidence to suggest that it does help with memory. And so there was a study relatively recently that eating mushrooms might be good for your brain. This study was looking at older men and women who live in Singapore. So whether or not it's applicable to an American population, another point of discussion. But those older men and women who ate mushrooms as a part of a regular diet did have a lower risk of developing mild cognitive impairment, which is a brain condition that often happens before the onset of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Well, it is important to remember that this study was from a population in an entirely different country on the other side of the planet, and there is something to be said about the different ways of life that might affect the outcomes of a study on those different populations.
Right.
So what it also doesn't do is prove cause and effect. So all it's doing is demonstrating, it's not proving anything, but it's demonstrating an association between consumption of mushrooms and reduced risk of this mild cognitive impairment. But the other confounding factor with a lot of these studies, and this one in particular too, is that studies that look at a specific food or a specific nutrient and risk of X, Y, or Z is often confounded by the fact that people who eat healthy foods are also more likely to engage in healthy lifestyle behaviors outside of eating, like regular exercise, sufficient sleep, they have better immune systems. So it's hard to kind of tease apart what actually is helping with one specific condition as opposed to what is a part of a healthy lifestyle behavior that might be helping several conditions. So, and the science behind it is that mushrooms, like a lot of other vegetables, do contain a lot of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant substances that can help to protect the brain, because a lot of the problem with memory issues in Alzheimer's is inflammation and plaque buildup on the brain. But the same is true for other diets that are rich in vegetables that might also reduce the risk of dementia. So if you are able to follow a more heart healthy, more plant-based, maybe Mediterranean style diet that tends to be higher in vegetables, those sorts of diets are also associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it's not just the mushrooms, but the mushrooms are probably helping at least a little bit.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that, yes, mushrooms are great because they're part of our whole vegetables that we need to be healthy. And it's hard to, what'd you say, cause and effect? Is that how you said? As far as the research, it's hard to pinpoint that it was exactly just the mushrooms that prevented Alzheimer's, that it could have been
Right.
that and other variables.
Right. It
But
was that and other variables. Yeah.
right. But mushrooms are great either way.
Mhm.
Okay. And can I ask you a question? You also mentioned inflammation, and if this is going too far off, we don't have to go there. But I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, eat this to decrease your inflammation." What do people mean when they say inflammation? And is that a real thing?
Yeah. Inflammation is
Okay.
what's tricky with food and inflammation is that it's not as simple as saying, you have an infection in the body that your immune system is responding to, and now you have inflammation. Inflammation is really just the activation of the immune system and the infiltration of plasma cells and lymphocytes and all sorts of little white blood cells that are there to stage an immune response to something. Inflammation, as it's measured with a lot of dietary studies, is looking at markers of inflammation. So it's looking at levels of certain proteins or enzymes in the body that indicate that inflammation is happening somewhere. One of the common things that they're looking for is something called C-reactive protein, or CRP. And if you have an elevated level of CRP, it means that you have inflammation somewhere in the body. What it doesn't say is where that inflammation is. Okay, so when they're talking about reducing inflammation with diet, and I think we might be talking about this a little later with a plant-based diet, but there are some dietary components that are associated with higher levels of inflammation, and those inflammation that you could be measured by those markers of inflammation. So it's not saying exactly where the inflammation is, but diets that are higher in animal products and saturated fat tend to be associated with higher levels of inflammatory markers, as opposed to more plant-based diets that have more of an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect are associated with lower levels of inflammatory markers.
Okay, so are you saying that, going back to the animal based diet, are you saying that people that eat more of that kind of diet, that their markers will show a higher inflammation somewhere in their body? Is that what you're saying?
They tend to, yes. So that's,
okay.
I'm also being very careful with my words on purpose, because
I know you're like an attorney.
Well,
I love that, because you're so about the science, and that's what I love. That's
right. And the thing about science, I mean, like, science is a process. And so
right.
what happens with you do science, I'm going to do science today, and I get evidence. I'm not proving anything. And the whole point of science is to provide you with more evidence for or against whatever hypothesis you had when you came in.
Right.
So when I say the science suggests that a certain type of diet is associated with greater levels of inflammatory markers, what that's not saying, and because I can't prove it, is that the diet is making you inflamed. It's just saying that people who tend to eat this diet also tend to have higher levels of inflammatory markers. It's very similar. I know we've talked about BMI before a ton, and whether or not BMI is good for an individual level, I don't think so. And we can talk about that a whole nother different time. But to say that, your risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke goes up if your BMI goes up is not saying that if your BMI is 40, you're going to have these things. It's saying that on a population level, people who have a BMI in this range tend to have more of these conditions. It's not proving, it's not saying you will definitely have this if you have this BMI. It's just mentioning an association. And that's what the science is giving you, is associations.
I see. And that's so great. I love the way you just explained it, because really it's just one marker. It's just, going back to the analogy you just gave of BMI, I get that. So just because your BMI is 40 doesn't mean that you're going to have these. However, we do know that people that are at 40 are at a greater risk for those things. So that's what you're saying about the nutrition. What we're finding is overall, people that have more of an animal diet, when they are tested, their markers are higher for inflammation somewhere in the body, but that
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean that for Lori to eat a steak, I'm going to have high markers.
Right. The other point that I think I would be remiss as a scientist if I didn't mention is that some of it depends too, your inflammatory panel depends on your amount of body fat and where that body fat is located. So
Really?
a lot of people think that fat is just a storage organ. All it is there to hold my extra triglycerides is the official, biochemical term, but my fat pads in my body is just there to store the extra fat and energy, and that's all it is. Fat is actually a very complex organ, and it has an exocrine function, and by exocrine I mean it secretes certain things, or it promotes the secretion of certain compounds. And fat that is present in the abdomen, so if you're apple shaped or the android sort of fat distribution, is associated with increased levels of pro-inflammatory hormones and pro-inflammatory markers. So if you are more pear shaped, I mean wider hips, bigger butt, larger legs, that's where you store more of your fat. There's less of an association with those increased inflammatory markers than it is if you carry your weight in your midsection.
Wow. That's just fascinating. And I've always heard that too, although I didn't hear it explained like that abdominal fat is a higher risk of heart disease than like if you carry it on your hips or your legs. I've heard that as well.
Yep.
Wow. Oh, this is so great. Okay. Next question. Are sprouts and broccoli sprouts more nutritious than the whole broccoli? So I guess there's a thing going around that's saying just the sprouts are the most nutritious out of the whole, I guess, vegetable.
Yeah. And I love this question because, and I'm sure you're not surprised by this, but every time I read something that's like, is this more nutritious than this? Like, well, what do you mean? Or is this healthier than, what do you mean by, what do you mean by more nutritious? They both have goods, right? They both have great components. So both broccoli and broccoli sprouts, obviously full of antioxidants, full of phytonutrients. Broccoli sprouts are probably getting a little more popular because they can have a lot more of certain phytonutrients than like the big bunches of broccoli you could buy at the grocery store. Now, some of these are very specific phytonutrients, and broccoli sprouts in particular is becoming, I think, a little more famous because it has, I want to say, up to 50 times more of a phytonutrient called sulforaphane. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Sulforaphane.
Not that any of us, Sarah, would have
exactly
known.
Right. No, it has to be right. So it's sulforaphane. So this is a compound that's present in both broccoli and broccoli sprouts, but it's present in way higher concentrations in broccoli sprouts than it is in the actual broccoli. So this compound is so intriguing, I guess, because it is supposedly has anti-cancer effects, anti-diabetic effects. It's present in really high concentrations in broccoli sprouts that are specifically like 3 to 4 days old. So if you're looking for those little baby broccoli sprouts, those are the ones that are really going to pack the punch when it comes to this one specific nutrient. That being said, like I said, there's pros and cons to both, right? And if you prefer just regular broccoli, it's fine. Both forms of broccoli are providing really valuable nutrition in a tasty and convenient form. And, if you're not a broccoli sprout eater, you're going to be fine just eating broccoli. Other way is true too.
So that's what I was saying. So if you don't like broccoli, can you just buy the sprouts and put them in a smoothie?
Yeah, you could try it.
Yeah. And see.
If you don't like broccoli, I would suggest maybe trying a different way to cook it, because roasting things I have found makes them so much better.
Yeah, always. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, is there a next question? Is there research to show benefits of chicory? Which, by the way, I had never heard of chicory until I got this question. So first, can you tell us what chicory is before we talk about the benefits?
Yeah, chicory is just a root. It's a root vegetable. It's not super common in the United States, but it is common in some areas. Chicory root, there are some demonstrated benefits of chicory. So chicory is a really good source of something called, and I'm being very careful with how I say it because it sounds like something else, inulin, which is spelled just like insulin, but without the S.
Okay.
It's a very good source of inulin. Inulin is a type of fiber that we refer to as a prebiotic. So you know about probiotics, they're the beneficial gut bacteria that live in your intestines. Prebiotics are the food that probiotics prefer to eat. So if you're eating a lot of prebiotic fiber, so inulin is present in chicory root, it's also present in onions, a lot of other kind of cruciferous vegetables, but it's an example of a type of prebiotic that helps to support the health of your gut microbiome. So the little critters living in your GI tract that are there to help support your immune system and digest your food. So essentially a prebiotic, like I said, is the food that a probiotic prefers to eat. And by consuming a lot of this prebiotic, or reasonable amounts of this prebiotic, what you're essentially doing is supporting the growth and development of the healthy bacteria in your gut. So that also helps to support a healthy immune system. Now, because it is a fiber too, it's not just beneficial for the gut microbiome, but chicory root has that prebiotic fiber, and any type of fiber is really going to help you with constipation. It can help with blood sugar control, since it's feeding and promoting the growth of that bacteria. That some of those bacteria in your gut are involved in the metabolism of carbohydrates. So if you're support those beneficial bacteria, you're able to support better blood sugar control. And then also potentially weight management, due to its potential impact on reducing levels of the hormone called ghrelin, which is responsible for your feeling hungry. So yeah, there's definitely some benefits to chicory. What I found out that I did not know is that if you are a coffee drinker and you would like to—
Which I am.
I know. If you would like to reduce your intake of caffeine, or coffee, I guess, certain specialty stores, maybe some grocery stores, sell dehydrated chicory root that you use as sort of like a coffee replacement. And it has a very similar flavor profile, but without the caffeine. So
okay, I don't think I'm going to have to do that. However,
Yeah,
I am
no.
going to get some. I need my caffeine for my 4:15 wake up. But that is so great. I'm so excited. Now I'm going to have to go get me some chicory. I got to figure out. And you know what's so fun? This sidebar about me. Oh, before I tell you my sidebar, I want to say a shout out to Michelle. Michelle's on. She said, hey, Sarah, Jen McAllister, another trainer. Hey, Jen. So I don't know when you guys jumped on here, but so glad you guys are joining. If you guys have any questions, those of you that are coming on, pop them in. I'm going to check every once in a while. I'm going to jump over here and look for your questions if you have those for Sarah. But where was that? See, I should have said it because I forgot. Chicory. Oh, you know what I found out about me? I love roots. Like my body craves like beets. I could drink and eat a whole thing of beets in one sitting. So that's why I'm excited about chicory, which I think I don't know what that means I'm deficient in, but when I was little, well, I'm not going to say it on the Facebook Live. My campers know I told them, but like I'll just say I love dirt. That's what I say. And so like all root stuff, like my body literally craves that. So I'm sure there's some minerals in there that I'm great. But so now I'm all about the chicory. Watch me. I'm going to get me some of that.
I'm curious now, do you really like bitter sort of flavors, like cruciferous vegetables, that roasty sort of earthy?
I love it, but I will. So yes, here's a story. When Tony and I first married, which was 100 years ago, we were living in Florida. We were both in school at the time, and he came home and I had a whole head of cauliflower, and I had cut it all up and I had it on a plate and I had a titch of dip, and I'm eating it. He's like, what's for dinner? I was like, cauliflower. What, you need more than that? Like literally. So I could just sit. I kind of got burnt out on broccoli because when my children were little, I think we had it 3 or 4 times a week, and we did all the things. We steamed it, we baked it, we grilled it. So now I don't know if we just did that because that's what they preferred, but now I want to eat everything green except broccoli. I mean, I'll eat it. I don't mind it. And I like it all the ways, but I prefer other greens. So yeah, I do like, how do you say that? Cruciferous? Did I say
Cruciferous,
that right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Broccoli, cauliflower. If life pro tip, a thing that I've been doing a lot lately is for just really fast, healthy meals is let me back up a second. One of the things they teach us at the Culinary Medicine Institute is flavor profiles, and using different flavors to build a palatable meal, that has a bunch of the different flavor profiles in it, and how you can balance, sweet with spicy, with salty, with umami, which is that kind of rich flavor, with bitter sometimes. And what I love to do when I'm just crunched for time is I will roast sweet potatoes, just whole sweet potatoes, roast them, pan fry some chickpeas until they're crispy, put whatever I can reach in the drawer, which is right next to you. So, cumin, chili powder, salt, pepper, turmeric, anything you kind of want to throw in there. And then I make a pesto with just regular jarred pesto sauce. I don't do anything special. I'm not a chef, but then I will put it in a food processor with an entire head of broccoli, and you make a broccoli pesto. And so you're layering the sweet of the sweet potato, the kind of savory of the chickpeas, the bitter sort of earthy flavor of the pesto, and then you throw a dollop of Greek yogurt on top for the tangy, and it is like an explosion of all the flavors in your mouth. And
my mouth is literally watering. That's a party in your mouth.
I love it. And you can make a huge batch. It lasts in the fridge all week. My kids don't get sick of eating it. I can get the toddler to eat it. So that is Sarah's pro tip for a quick, healthy meal.
And so do you just eat it like that? Do you put it with anything? Do you drink
No,
it?
I smash up one of the sweet potato halves and then cover it with the chickpeas, put the broccoli pesto on top, dollop of Greek yogurt, and I'm good. I'm golden.
Oh my gosh. That's me in mouth water. That is
You don't have to
awesome.
measure anything. That's my favorite part, is like you roast them till they're done. You kind of
Right.
it's like, it's okay.
That's how I roll too.
Not the bar to low. Like, come on.
That's right. We got things to do. We're changing the world here.
We're busy.
Awesome. Oh, that was great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so next
Tangent,
question
sorry.
yeah, is soy healthy or not? Is the question.
Okay, so that's the same question, right? Is it healthy? Healthy by what? What do you mean healthy?
Right.
I mean, so I'm gonna try to answer it. But I also, I do that to try and spark critical thinking, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what does healthy mean? Okay, if you're asking what is something healthy, what do you mean by healthy? Because what's healthy in one respect is not necessarily the same in the other respect. But I digress. I will answer the question. Yes, I think soy is healthy. So I say that because soybeans, from which all of these soy products are created, that's soy milk, that's tofu, that's tempeh, which is a fermented soy product.
Mm-hmm.
Soybeans are naturally really rich in protein. They contain all of the essential amino acids that your body needs. So soybeans are one of very few plant-based sources of complete protein. So
really, I didn't know that. Wait, so a soybean is complete protein?
Soy is a complete protein along with quinoa, and
okay.
The other ones are escaping me, amaranth, I want to say, but they're less common. So the two most common plant-based sources of complete protein are soy and quinoa.
I did not know that. Okay.
Whereas if you wanted a plant-based protein that's not complete, you combine it. So beans and rice. So beans,
right.
Some of the amino acids, rice has the rest of them. You combine them, you get a complete protein. So
right.
Good life pro tip for the vegetarians looking to get complete sources of protein from plant-based sources. But anyway, so soy, like I said, rich in protein, contains all those amino acids, but they're also rich in plant-based sources of fat and fiber and lots of really important vitamins and minerals and other of those beneficial plant compounds of phytonutrients. So the soy and the foods that you create soy from are rich in all of those macro and micronutrients, but they also, and this is where it gets a little dicey, or the concern comes from. Soy contains something called a soy isoflavone, which is a plant compound that's believed to have a lot of the health benefits. But the issue comes in is that there's something in there called a phytoestrogen, and the estrogen is what gets people all up in a bunch. Understandably so. Estrogen is a hormone, but a phytoestrogen from soy isn't the same thing as the estrogen that you or I create, right? So it's not going to function in the body the same way. There's obviously a lot more research that needs to be done, and this is another one of those ones where I'm saying that there's strong evidence to suggest safety in that, but it's never a good idea to say, well, all the evidence we have means it's safe, so we should never look at it again. Of course, there should always be more research. So the concern with soy really comes from those phytoestrogens and concerns that it mimics the female reproductive hormone estrogen. They are similar in chemical structure, but the soy plant-based one is a lot weaker and doesn't have the same effects in the body as estrogen does. There's also some concern that soy increases the risk of cancer. Most studies are finding no negative effect, and in some cases it might even offer some protection against certain cancers. So not really a lot of strong evidence to suggest that there's an increased risk of cancer from consuming soy. A lot of other concerns with like thyroid function. It's going to make men grow female, characteristics. Concerns about anti-nutrients, which are compounds that lower your body's ability to absorb other nutrients, or other digestive issues. I will say that there are some people that have digestive issues with soy, and it's usually because of an intolerance and not because of a problem with the soy itself. For example, if I drink a ton of soy milk, I am not going to be a happy camper, but that's just a me and my digestive system thing. That's not because of the soy milk itself. So if I were to summarize all of it, the common concerns with the consumption of soy, not really any of them are supported by strong science, although I will never be the one to say we don't need to research it more. More research is needed. But what I will say about soy products, especially minimally processed soy foods like soybeans, like the whole soybean or edamame.
Yeah, I eat those.
Tofu, tempeh, unsweetened soy milks or soy-based dairy products. Those are going to be your superior sources of the beneficial plant nutrients, as opposed to the more highly processed soy products. So like most other things, the less processed, the better.
Right. That is so great. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll just share something that's personal. Um, I I now consume a soy product, whether it's chickpeas or edamame. I never say that right. Or I use soy as my base in my smoothies because I have zero estrogen, and because of my family risk factors, I can't do a hormone replacement treatment, and so I am doing it via food, and I can personally tell a difference if I when I eat soy and when soy products and when I don't. So I can say that at least for me, it's been awesome.
That is good to hear.
Yes. So all of you, actually, I think I had someone who said so they were perimenopausal. Which when you're perimenopausal, that shit cray, and you're going like this all the time. But once you have zero estrogen, for me, I prefer food. I don't even prefer food. I can't do anything else because of risk factors. So food it is for me. Um, okay. Thank you for that, Sarah, for that answer. Um, is there any science to support plant-based diets and autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, so we touched on this just a little bit a while ago because we tend to digress into other areas of our conversation.
Always.
But yeah, absolutely. So people who suffer from autoimmune diseases can definitely benefit from switching to a whole food or plant-based diet, which includes cutting out foods that are suspected to exacerbate or make worse any autoimmune systems. Now, I mentioned autoimmune disease because that is any autoimmune condition is one that is going to have an inflammatory basis. So if I have Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, if I have rheumatoid arthritis, any of those lupus, any of those autoimmune diseases, I'm going to have a higher level of inflammation just due to the nature of the autoimmune disease. And a lot of the research on plant-based diets and autoimmune diseases or inflammatory conditions have that positive association between the consumption of a plant-based diet and the reduction of symptoms and the reduction of those inflammatory markers. As well as cutting out any foods that exacerbate the autoimmune systems. Now, for certain autoimmune diseases, particularly those of the gut, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, what might make a trigger food is very person dependent. So folks with ulcerative colitis, for example, or an inflammatory bowel disease, we'll just call it, can't handle acidic foods like tomatoes or a lot of citrus fruits, but they can have the other foods just fine. Other ones really struggle with really high fiber, or they might struggle with high fat foods. That part gets what you should be cutting out to reduce making symptoms worse is really person dependent. However, the eating more of the whole foods and plant-based foods tend to have that anti-inflammatory effect. So not just looking at autoimmune diseases though, people who follow either a vegetarian or a vegan diet in general are associated with lower levels of those inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, like we talked about before. Whereas, like I said earlier, the diets that are higher in animal products and specifically saturated fat do tend to promote inflammation or have higher levels of those inflammatory markers.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Plants, good for inflammation.
Awesome. And let me ask you, when you were talking about animal-based, so does that include, and I know we didn't put this on the list of questions, but does that include animal milk? Like if you drink a animal milk, is that, I guess that's an animal product.
Mm-hmm.
So yep. That can milk cause a greater inflammation than, well, I guess than what, like maybe a soy or
yeah, than a plant milk. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And is it weird to call them plant milks? Like that's a new thing now, calling it, because soy milk's been a thing for a while, almond milk a thing for a while, but now I'm seeing like maybe it's just a marketing thing that they're calling them plant milks.
I literally just said, I've never heard that. I literally just said that, but here's what I used to say, because I am still a milk drinker. So I drink soy in my smoothie, but I, in the wintertime, make me a cafe mocha in the afternoon because I'm a barista. That's my side hustle. But I like skim milk. And where was I going with this? I was going somewhere with, and I remember like a couple of years ago thinking, I was like, if I were milk, I would sue, I'm not a sewer, but I would go after almond and cashew and soy, because that's not milk. Like in my mind, milk comes from an animal udder. That's milk. Like you literally took a seed and somehow made that milk. That's not milk, but that has never happened. So, but I literally just said, I didn't know that that's what they were calling it. But in my mind, all of those are plant and milk is animal.
Right. And I am the person that in my work fridge, I have a carton of oat milk, which is
Oh my gosh. So my best friend, that's her favorite now. She's like, you have to try it. And I'm such a milk snob. Like I can do anything in a smoothie, but if I have it in my coffee, it has to be from a cow. And she
Mm,
literally just said that she's like, oatmeal is even better than your whole whipping cream. I'm like, not possible. So I haven't tried it yet, but she loves it. So isn't
I,
that made of oats?
I guess so. I
Yeah.
didn't. I just bought it and then I put it in my milk or I put it in my I put it in my coffee and it was fine. I am at home. I will put. I'm not a milk drinker, but I will put a splash of skim milk in my coffee. I prefer skim milk. It's not real milk. It's just white water, isn't it?
Yeah.
Back to your question. So is milk pro-inflammatory? I guess. I hesitate to say that the milk itself. If you remember what I said was animal-based products and saturated fat, and you are going to get saturated fat if it's an animal-based dairy product. So butter, so cream,
Cheese.
cheese, milk, aside from skim, I guess. I guess I wouldn't go as far as to say that if you drink skim milk, it's essentially the same inflammation-wise as drinking water. I don't think so. Obviously, there's some proteins in there. There's some compounds. We never are really able to separate a food component into one specific thing and say that that's the thing that causes inflammation.
Right.
But when I say an animal product-based diet or a high saturated fat diet, just know that, most of the sources of saturated fat in animal products are the ones that are associated with high or, dietary sources of cholesterol are going to come from an animal product. So it's more of a dietary pattern that tends to be more animal product / saturated fat based as compared to a plant-based diet.
Okay. So off of that, and I hate to ask it like this, but if you ate cheese on a regular, like Parmesan cheese or sharp cheddar cheese on a regular basis, would that potentially increase your inflammation markers?
Well, I'm going to say yes, but
Because it's
that up with is that if you are having moderate amounts of cheese, moderate cheese intake, that's not what's going to be what causes you, symptoms of inflammation. It's not what's going to cause that blood vessel damage that you get from chronic inflammation. It's not going to cause a lot of systemic problems. Where you get more of it is in the saturated fat that's in animal meats and how those animal meats are cooked, and less so the dairy products. Now, there's a whole nother thing I have about, and so we're going to jump on into that one
let's go.
about dairy products, right?
Okay.
So,
Because they're kind of getting a bad rap too now, like milk
they are.
and cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, they are in American studies. So if you look at a lot of the European studies, so people who've been doing dairy a lot longer than Americans have, right? And who do it, I think, in a better way. They have a better approach to it. They tend not to have the, cheese is bad, so I can't have any, or dairy products are good, so I'm gonna have ice cream for dinner. They don't have that sort of all or nothing mentality. And a lot of the research in, the European countries where full fat dairy products are common, finding that people who consume moderate amounts of full fat dairy products, cheese, butter, milk, tend to have lower waist to hip ratios. They tend to have lower inflammatory markers. They tend to have lower risk of disease, all-cause mortality, than people who consume greater amounts of lower reduced fat animal based.
And is that because like the whole fat is so satiating that they don't eat as much?
That could have something to do with it, but what I think is probably more is kind of a throwback to what I said earlier, is that people who live in those areas tend to have healthier lifestyles. Let's talk about French paradox for a minute, right? So the French people eat a diet that is incredibly rich, and they have just truckloads of delicious crusty bread and vats of wine, and yet they enjoy relatively low risk of all-cause mortality and heart disease and cancer and things that are devastating the United States. And how is that possible? It's because it's not just the food that they're eating, it's how they're eating it, it's their lifestyle outside of the eating. They tend to be a lot more physically active, they tend to be social, they have better, social interactions and wellness. And the thing about food is that it's not just a vehicle for nutrients to keep you from, it's a social experience. It is therapy, but in a good, it's not like the my feelings, I'm eating and I'm in this social environment and I am enjoying myself and it's part of my self-care and wellness. And I think that the combination of different lifestyle behaviors is why we see that French paradox, as opposed to, here we tend to be a little more high strung, right?
I do. I think so. As you're sitting there saying, I'm like, that's so true. And I lived in Europe for several years. And like little thing, one of the things you mentioned, their overall lifestyle, like in France, or at least when we were there, like you walked to the market or rode your bike every day to get your dinner. So you moved, movement was part of your daily activity. And actually you were moving to go get your food, just the way that they lived. So that's just so interesting. And I also feel like as Americans, this is just no science, obviously just me looking around and working in this industry.
It's observational. It's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Observation. I like that word. That we like a lot of fake stuff. Like I hate to use that word, but like processed stuff. Like we would, and I'm not just saying McDonald's. Everybody loves the McDonald's every now and then, but like I think that as Americans, we would prefer a Big Mac and a French fry and a Coke, as opposed to preferring, like literally wanting a big salad and a piece of burger on the side and a glass of wine. Like I don't know. It seems like we're always drawn to more processed foods than over in Germany and France. At least that's what it appears to be.
I do. And this is of course observational. So I'm jumping in your observational boat. I think we've talked about it before. I think a lot of it, at least a good chunk of it, has to do with, remember when we demonized fat those decades?
Oh my, that was in the 80s. Yes.
And fat was bad. And then
Yes.
nobody wanted any fat. So the thing about fat is that it is delicious and
Yes.
food's palatable and it's satiating and it's filling, and it is rich in many senses of the word. So when
Yes.
fat out of a food, you have to replicate that somehow. How do you do it? Sugar, salt.
Yeah.
So we're sacrificing the fat content because fat's high in calories, and that's a whole nother barrel of worms is calories, right? But
Right.
high in calories and fat's scary. So we're going to take the fat out, but we're going to replace it with greater amounts of starches, sugar, simple,
Right.
sugars, highly processed things. And that's kind of what we've gotten used to. And so if I go back to my, cheese in Europe example, the population there that's having literally just 2 ounces of cheese, and they're not having a block of cheese, or they're not putting liquid plastic cheese on their nachos.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the same type of cheese, are we? We're really
right. No, and usually, at least when we were there, and a big old thing of grapes and strawberries and some brochin and a glass of wine. Oh my gosh, I could live off of that. Oh, it's so good. So I want to pause you here. It says if we could oh my gosh. Okay, so someone posted a question, said they have chicory coffee in NOLA. Where you went to
you didn't
school.
like it?
No, she just said, if you go to NOLA with us, we're going to take you to get some chicory coffee. All right, Amanda Mo, I'm in. And then, here's another one. Cafe Du Monde in New Orleans specializes in, New Orleans is where it's at. And Melissa Grattan says, hey.
Hey guys.
Awesome. Yeah, so everyone's all in the chicory coffee. I just feel behind on that one.
I was in New Orleans for that teaching kitchen part of the culinary medicine school I went to, and I didn't get a chance to go to Cafe Du Monde because I was literally there for 2 days. And every time I had time to go out, the line was 1.5 miles long. It's like, I got a flight in 2 hours. Like,
right.
But maybe next time, and then we'll go down and and you have to have beignets because it's a cultural experience. It's not.
Oh, I can do a beignet. I love me a beignet. Okay. Oh, thank you for all of that awesomeness, Sarah. Can we dive into gut health? So the question I got was, what are optimal foods for good gut health?
And I love that this question came next because it's a very similar answer. So just like we talked about with plant-based nutrition a little earlier, those plant-based foods are providing phytonutrients, antioxidants.
Can I ask you a question? What's a phytonutrient?
A phytonutrient is a micronutrient. So macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, water, I guess, if you want to be, but it's not nutritive. I digress. Micronutrients, vitamins, minerals are general ones we talk about. But then there's also other nutrients that don't provide caloric value or energy, but they are a component of that food that can demonstrate a beneficial health effect. So the one that I butchered the name of earlier, I'm going to find it in my notes.
And again, this is
Lorraine.
Fido. Are you saying F-I-D?
I am saying Phyto, like,
Fido.
Yep.
Fido nutrient. Okay. So this is a nutrient. It has no caloric value, but it will add. What does it do again?
it is a compound that has beneficial health effects.
Okay.
And the word phyto, Phyto, is essentially a prefix that says plants. It's just a plant nutrient. So when I say phytonutrient, I mean a nutrient that comes from plants. That's all I mean.
Okay.
So that plant-based diet is obviously providing a lot of those macro and micro and phytonutrients and antioxidants and beneficial fiber and prebiotics that your probiotics like to eat, all of which helps to provide this anti-inflammatory benefit and to increase the diversity of gut microbiome. So when I say microbiome, I mean all the different types of little critters that live in your intestines. And these are good critters. We want them there. You have beneficial gut bacteria. You have a bunch of different kinds of them. By eating a more plant-based diet, what you're doing is promoting the health, wellness, and growth of those beneficial gut bacteria. And what's also beneficial about that, in addition to helping the good ones, when you have a really rich, strong, healthy microbiome, that also prevents opportunistic infection by the nasty bugs like the E. coli's and the other bacteria that can cause really just nasty sort of GI problems and can lead to a bunch of different health problems. So that plant-based diet that I was talking about, the ones that's rich in the nutrients, rich in fiber, the stuff that's going to keep your gut microbiome healthy is what's going to make your immune system healthy and your GI tract healthy.
Okay. So the answer is lots of vegetables. So what are optimal foods? So you're saying plant-based. So
I'm saying plants. Yeah.
fruit, vegetables. What about whole grains?
Whole grains good too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So plants.
So the whole grain, I mean, we've talked about whole grains a lot before, right? So
Yes.
Fiber content. So that's it, that the soluble fiber is good for slowing down the contents of the gut to allow you to really absorb your nutrients. The insoluble fiber, so the stuff you can't really absorb, that's good for creating, for lack of better word, it creates bulk and helps to reduce the risk of constipation. Whole grains also have a lot of those B vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. So anything in the nutrients coming from the plant, it's going to be in that plant-based food. And that's what your gut prefers, that the microbiome of your gut prefers to be digesting, as opposed to higher saturated fat. More animal products tend to have that more pro-inflammatory.
And let me ask you this, when you say animal products, like, does that include fish? I know fish are animals, but are those higher in?
Yes, in that fish have, I mean, they're an animal product, so it has saturated fat and it's got cholesterol. Different fish have oil profiles. And by oil profiles, I'm talking about your omega-3 versus your omega-6. To boil it down to kind of a explain like I'm 5 version, you want a balance of omega-6 to omega-3, and you want more omega-3s in your diet. We as Americans, spoiler, your omega-6 diet is associated with more of an inflammatory profile as opposed to a anti-inflammatory omega-3. The different fish are going to have different amounts of these oils in them. There's benefits to oily fish. I don't want to make it sound like you shouldn't be eating salmon. Like, salmon is good for you. It's got that beneficial oil in it. But really, I mean, what I want to stress is that the people who are eating just fish as their animal protein, they're not the ones having the problem. You know, they're the ones having the huge inflammatory problems. It's the people who are having a lot of the red meats, a lot of processed meats. And that's really where a lot of the health dangers from meat consumption come from, are from processed meats and from how you cook those meats, because of what happens to the different proteins and different compounds of animal products when they're exposed to super high temperatures.
Okay, so what would be like an example of a processed meat?
So a processed meat would be sausage, bacon, pepperoni, seasoned or cured meats, ham, something that wasn't essentially you went to the butcher and they just got it from the cow this morning. You know, anything kind of more south of that is going to be your processed meats, as opposed to the less processed. If you're able to get, you know, go to the deli counter, not deli, well, deli meat's a processed meat, not a good example. So the meat counter, you know, if you're going to get just the more whole cuts, the less processed, the more directly in line from the animal it came from, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, the processed meats are the ones that you need to be concerned about, not just because of the processing, but because of what goes into the processing. There's components that are a part of the curing and processing process. That's a tough thing to say. Right. That can, when they're exposed to high heat, for example, there's a compound called a nitrosamine that, or excuse me, nitric acid or nitrites that are in cured meats. So sausage, bacon, ham, stuff like that have nitrates in them. Nitrates are not inherently dangerous. There are nitrates present in plant foods. But when you cook those foods at super high temperatures, those nitrates change into something called a nitrosamine, which is what I just looked up and said a second ago. A nitrosamine is a potentially carcinogenic compound. So that could cause cancer. We're getting a lot of problems from, you know, if you are consuming moderate amounts of animal protein, you're trying to use it as more of a garnish than you are a main source of the meal, and you're using as little processed meat as possible, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. It's diets that are higher in these processed meat products, that are higher in a lot of other processed, because that's the other thing too, is if you're a person that's eating a ton of processed meat, you're probably not eating a ton of whole grains and a ton of fruits and vegetables too. So you judge a diet by the company it keeps. I know we've talked about that before. Yeah. Where you're seeing a lot of the detrimental health effects are coming not just from the fact that you have sausage, but because of the lack of other healthier foods and healthier behaviors and patterns, not just the one specific food. There's I am hesitant to say that there is a known association with one specific nutrient and negative health effects other than trans fat. Trans fat is the only thing that we know is there's no positive health effects of trans fat. There can only be bad for health when you consume trans fat.
Okay. Do you think that fish, like if you just buy salmon at the grocery store or fresh shrimp, would you consider that highly processed?
No.
Okay.
I would consider breaded and fried shrimp to be more processed. Yeah. Even though there's not really processing of the meat itself, your cooking method can also really make or break the nutrient content of a food.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Salmon steak, that's fine. That's
okay, fine. Good. All right, let me check our questions here. Okay, we are good. All right, what's our time to? Oh my gosh, it is 7:56.
We can keep going. It's fine.
Are you sure?
I'm good. Yep.
Okay, so maybe we'll just hit 2 more, and then maybe you and I can come back in a couple weeks and do it again. Is that even okay? Yeah. Or we can do it next month, because I know you're crazy busy with all of your college kids. Guys, see, we should we just have so much. Okay, so then we'll finish
do this every time.
I know. We'll do this with sugar, and we always have the sugar question. Mm-hmm. So here was one that I got. What is the best way to manage or get rid of sugar cravings?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this under the assumption that whoever asked this has already tried going cold turkey on the sugar and found little success, because it's easy to when you're a sweet summer child and you eat a lot of sugar and you think, I'm just going to stop eating sugar, not super successful.
Right.
It's fine. It's not, that's not indicative of your potential for future success. So what I will say is that if you have not had success just trying to cut it all out, then you can use the turnover of your taste buds to your advantage. So a taste bud, you all heard of taste bud, yeah? It's an actual physical structure on the surface of your tongue. I could show you.
Don't they get replaced? Like, don't they?
They do, yep.
Yes.
Yep, so it's a physical structure on the surface of your tongue. You have 2 different types of what are called papillae on your tongue. One of them, which is called circumvallate. You don't need to know this, but I love throwing the words out. Those actually have taste bud receptors around them. And in those receptors are the enzymes that are responsible for dissolving, the food that comes in contact and interpreting that as flavor, but they're living, cells, and cells don't live forever. So they do have a turnover. The average lifespan of a taste bud is estimated to be only about 10 days. And there is some variation of that number, right? But the other thing too is that not all of your taste buds, like not all of my taste buds are on the same life cycle. They didn't all, get born, developed 10 days ago. So what you can't expect reasonably is to say, if I just stick with something for 10 days, I will have changed my flavor profile. That's not how that works. Give yourself a little more grace than that. But know that you can change your flavor preferences over a more extended period of time. you may have heard 3 weeks. It takes 3 weeks to develop, you know, like new taste. I give yourself even a little more time than that, because what I don't want is for people to be discouraged by that.
Right.
Especially if we're so used to sugar being in things that shouldn't really be sweet, right? And then a lot of processed foods. So you can mindfully and gradually reduce your intake of sugar, even eventually to the point where your taste buds that are used to sweet turn over and they get replaced by taste buds that are used to less sweet or even not sweet. And if you're able to keep that up for long enough, eventually the regular sweet foods might even be like way too sweet for your taste anymore. Like I said, a common story you might hear is that it takes 3 weeks to change your taste preferences, but I do love to manage expectations in a way that promotes success. So know that it might take a little longer than that, but it is possible. So gradually reducing the amount of sweet, sugar, whatever it is, will help you to eventually turn over those taste buds. And then you just won't be looking for it as much, because when you have those sweet foods, they're going to be cloying too sweet.
So what you're saying is try to slowly minimize the amount of sugar you're eating per day and give yourself a longer time period, 3, 4, 5 weeks, however long. And then eventually you will stop craving it because you will have turned over your taste buds and you won't, or what actually wasn't sweet to you before, like, oh, how do you say
what you crave might still, I mean, like that might still be not as associated with how you are perceiving the taste of things. And let me try to explain it better. So what I'm suggesting is a gradual reduction of sugar to the point, or sweet, you know, to the point that if you do go back and have what you would have had before, it's too sweet and it is too sweet, I guess is what I was saying.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're still craving sweet, that's probably more of a learned behavior that takes a little bit more time to stick with until that habit becomes a different habit and then becomes an ingrained sort of behavior. So I mean, they're definitely linked. Of course, they are definitely linked.
Right.
Changing your taste profile versus changing your craving preferences, or what you prefer to eat when you're feeling hungry or ravenous, related, but not exactly the same.
Yeah. So good. So good. Okay. Thank you. And then we'll do this last one. Does being insulin resistant make you crave sugar? I don't understand that question. So.
Oh, I get it. No, it's cool.
Okay.
And we're going to back up too. So I want to first make sure that we understand insulin and its function, like what it is and what does it do. So insulin is a hormone, right? And when you eat a food that contains a carbohydrate, the digestion of that carbohydrate causes an increase in your blood glucose. So if I eat bread, my blood sugar or my blood glucose is going to go up. All right.
And fruit too. Like if you eat fruit or vegetable, those are
all any carbohydrate, carbohydrate. Yep.
Yeah.
And remember, carbohydrate is just a combination of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's not anything scary or mean or bad or good. It just is what it is. And what it does when it gets digested is it makes your blood glucose go up, right? So the cool thing is that all the cells of your body want to use glucose for energy. So when your blood glucose goes up, you want that glucose to be able to get into the cells of the body to be used for energy.
Yep.
Insulin is think of insulin as the key that unlocks the cell to let the glucose in.
Okay.
The amount of glucose left in the blood goes back down. So what happens? I'm eating bread, my blood glucose goes up. I am stimulated to secrete insulin, which then goes to the cells, unlocks them, and there's not a literal door there, but stick with me.
Right. But then that way the carbohydrate goes in and it can be used as the fuel for the movement of the body.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So that's what happens under normal circumstances.
Okay.
When you have insulin resistance, and I guess I want to back up even a second here too, because insulin resistance and diabetes always goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
To make sure we understand the difference between the two different types of diabetes.
Okay.
One used to be called juvenile diabetes because it's almost always diagnosed when you're a kid.
Not anymore.
It's not called that anymore because it's not just diagnosed in children, although it still mostly is.
Right.
Also used to be referred to as insulin dependent diabetes, and it's not, for a different reason. I'll get to that in a second. It's just called type 1 diabetes. What happens in type 1 diabetes is that there's an inflammatory process, an autoimmune reaction, something that causes your pancreas to stop producing insulin. Your pancreas cannot produce it anymore, ever. You're done. There's no way to get it back. The specific cells in the pancreas called beta islet cells are responsible for producing insulin. They're dead. They're gone. You can't get it back. All right. So that's, you absolutely have to have insulin with type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes happens after a period of increasing insulin resistance. So what's happening is that for various reasons, your body is becoming less and less responsive to the insulin that you are producing. So your pancreas kind of kicks it up a notch and produces more insulin, more insulin. So you're still producing, you're actually producing more after a little while, but then it gets to a tipping point where it's like, oh, well, forget it. It's not gonna work anyway. So it just kind of stops. This one, type 2 over here, because I'm a visual person, type 2 used to be called non-insulin dependent diabetes because you can treat it up to a certain point reasonably with just diet and exercise.
Right.
One of the reasons we kind of don't call it insulin dependent versus non-insulin dependent is that I want to say like 95 some odd % of the insulin that's used in the United States is used for people who have type 2 diabetes. So it's just not,
no way.
It's not a correct nomenclature anymore. It's just not.
Right.
We have type 1 diabetes where you are not producing any insulin whatsoever. Type 2, you are still capable of producing insulin. Your body's not responding to it.
Okay.
Insulin resistance happens before type 2 diabetes. It is reversible. It is manageable. It's not something that's you're going to get diabetes if you have insulin resistance. So go back to my answer. When we have insulin resistance, like I said, the insulin is still there. And in some cases, it's at higher levels than you would even normally see. But the key isn't working as well to unlock the cell door. So the glucose can't get into the cell and your blood sugar stays high. So your body cells don't know that you're insulin resistant. They have no idea. They're just there waiting. Oh, there goes my baby monitor. Let's turn that off.
Oh,
battery died. It's fine. He's fine. It's fine. So your cells don't know that they're insulin resistant. All they know is I'm sitting here, I'm not getting the energy that I need because the glucose is still locked out in the blood. So my body is going to, oh my gosh, sorry for the noise. My body's interpret that as starvation. And what happens when my body thinks my cells are starving is that it makes me physically starving. It makes me hungry. So this is why people with untreated or poorly managed diabetes often describe extreme hunger, even when they're eating ravenously.
oh
And
wow.
they might be having, I turned it off because it ran out of battery, side conversation. So they might be still eating a ton and dropping weight because what's happening is that they're eating a lot, their blood sugar is going higher and higher and higher, but none of that sugar, that energy is getting into the cells and your body still thinks you're starving. So it will get energy from other places and it'll cause weight loss, which is super, super dangerous. And we don't ever want people with diabetes to try and lose weight by not taking insulin and making their blood glucose high, because there's all sorts of vascular problems that happen with chronic high blood sugar. So to get back to the crux of the question, I was going to get there eventually. Whether or not insulin resistance makes you crave sugar versus any other type of food, salty, starchy, fatty, whatever, that's kind of up for debate. It's a common misconception that our bodies crave what we are lacking nutritionally. And I'll give an example. Salty foods, a lot of people crave salty foods. There's probably 3 people total in the United States who are actually sodium deficient. So they're not craving salty because they need salt. They're craving it because that's the flavor that they prefer.
Okay.
And I don't want to make it sound like a learned behavior, but it's a thing. I mean, it's a taste preference.
No, I guess I love dirt.
That's a whole nother. Yeah. So it's not that insulin resistance causes sugar cravings. It's that insulin resistance can cause any cravings because it's causing hunger, because what you're not doing, sorry, what's happening, because I'm trying to remove, it's not, what's happening is that the body is interpreting the lack of glucose transfer from the blood to the cells as starvation. So it's just making you hungry. What you crave when you're hungry depends
on you. Yeah. So whatever your learned behavior is. Okay. Sarah, I know I said that was our last one, but I had one that came up.
It's so fine. Go ahead.
Just this last one. I know you got babies to get to. So this one was thoughts on protein powder. I've heard pros and cons for medical professionals. And then I don't know if you can answer it, the second question, which is, does it matter when I eat? Oh, that's kind of a different question. So let's just go to the protein powder, because I get this all the time. And this came in today 3 different times. So thoughts on protein powder.
I have written some of your poor campers a novel about protein powders before, and I kept it because it's an example of like, hey, maybe don't take it too far. But what I will say about protein powders is that, where to start with this? Okay, so I guess I'll start with my concerns. And my concerns specific to the consumption of protein powders is that they are not regulated by any sort of regulatory body, by the FDA, by anything like that. So my concern is that they might, and because there are so many of them and they're so proliferative and everywhere, my concern is that they might not actually contain what they say on the label, and they don't have to prove it either. That's the thing. They don't have to anywhere. The other concern from a biochemical perspective I have is that these protein powders tend to have proteins, amino acids, that are in the wrong configuration. So what I mean by that, you can the structure of a protein is called an isomer, and you can have an L isomer or a D isomer. Your body can only absorb one of them, but the whey protein might have both of them, right? So you're getting like up to half of the protein that's in there is not usable by your body. So you're essentially paying for really, really expensive urine and feces, right? Because your gut is just going to excrete it. You don't need it, or you can't absorb what's there. So it can't be properly digested or used by the body. The other concern I have from a nutritional perspective is that a lot of these protein powders are processed, really highly processed with artificial sweeteners and additives. So if you're going to choose to use one, it's important to find one that's minimally processed and that is independently tested and verified for both purity and content. So I said before that they're not regulated. What I mean by that is they don't have to prove before they put it on the shelf what there is, what's in there. They don't even have to prove that it's safe. They just have to, here's your protein powder. A lot of reputable, nutrition companies, supplement companies can do independent testing through a different, regulatory body. A really common one is USP, or the US Pharmacopeal Convention. You'll see their labels on a lot of things. What that means is that the company paid for this third party to come in and
say that that's really
what was on the label is in that food. So my biggest thing, I guess, about protein powders is that the amount of protein you really need, even if you're super, super active, is probably not as high as you think it is. And even if it is pretty high, it's always better to get that from like a whole food, right? Because it's much more bioavailable in whole food products. So bioavailable means how easy it is for my body to digest and absorb the protein. For an example, we measure it in science. We measure the bioavailability of, we used to use egg as like the reference point. So things would be protein sources would be compared to an egg to tell us how easy it was for the human body to digest and absorb. And we even have something that's called the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, which nobody's ever going to need to know outside of a biochemistry lab, but we can evaluate the quality, for lack of a better word, of a protein and the digestibility and the absorbability and usability of a protein based on that score. And it's all whole foods. It's all food in its most natural form. What it isn't is super highly processed, whey-based, most of the time, protein powders that, quite frankly, what's probably happening is that you're consuming more protein than you need. And what happens when you consume a lot more protein than you need is not that you store that protein, is that protein gets broken down into its various carbohydrate, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen components and repackaged into either triglycerides that are stored as fat or glycogen that's stored in the liver. So I really think that you can meet your protein needs and goals with whole actual food and not with the protein powder. Is it not safe? Not necessarily. If you want to have a protein shake every now and then, if that's what helps you, meet your goals, feel your best, live your best life, probably not going to hurt you, but it's also probably not conferring the really popular benefits that protein powders are known for, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, yes, that was just, I love your answer. And I know this sounds so judgy what I'm about to say, but I always wonder, like, why wouldn't you just want to eat your food? I always wonder, and you know what else I've seen, and I see this in food journals because I see hundreds and hundreds over the course of each year, is I also think that people aren't aware of how many calories are in. They think that, oh, this is, well, I don't know what they think, but it'll be 700 calories for one protein drink for breakfast. I'm like, if you only get 1,800 calories, you're already past a third off of that drink that you don't even know what was in there. You know, I'm gonna get off my soapbox because I can go on for hours.
No, that's fine. I'll join you on the soapbox for a second because it is, I mean, if you're having 700 calories of a protein drink, you're probably also getting a lot of other ingredients in there. Excuse me, lots of tea. Protein and carbohydrate are equivalent from a caloric level, 4 grams of 4 calories per gram.
Yep.
So maybe the mental trick you do is to think like, well, it's protein, so it's going to keep me full longer. It's going to be more satiating. But the problem is that you're drinking liquid protein. And even though protein is really filling, liquid protein shoots through your stomach way faster than food-based protein does. The benefit, the satiating, filling benefits of protein are not the same with a liquid shake-based version as it is, you know, a plant-based or even lean, whole animal-based source of protein.
Right. Oh my gosh. Oh, Sarah, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share all of your amazingness and your education with our community. I would love if you would come back, if you're open to it, and I'll, you know, text you and we can, you know, put it on the maybe next month sometime, because I think we only got through half of our questions.
We knew this was going to happen and we did it anyway. So yeah,
I know.
I'd love to come back and talk to you again. And
oh my gosh, thank you. And love that you're educating those kids in college, and you're training up the medical students, which is awesome, that our doctors that are coming up are getting knowledge in nutrition and are going to be able to, like you, prescribe medicine and help, not medicine, food as medicine, and help use medicine and movement, you know, is a prescription of health. So so I thank you so much, and I can't wait for us to chat again.
looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Sarah.